Well, I think the British people, and in particular GB News viewers, will see through this attempt to deflect blame. A lot of the consequences that we have seen in the last 18 months on the economy, falling productivity, falling investment, sluggish growth, falling growth, rising unemployment, are all really effects of Labour decisions. There was nothing that's been unforeseeable that's happened since Labour came to government, like COVID or a war in Europe. So, Rachel Reeves has made a lot of decisions, big spending decisions, big tax rises, and she's seeing the effects of those today.
Kemi Badenoch was on form today. She called this one long waffle bomb, a new word there, almost straight out of the copybook of Boris Johnson. A laundry list of excuses, and that's really what it felt like to anybody listening in. A failure to accept any responsibility, and the markets don't like that kind of, blaming anybody but yourself. All it left was the residue, the fear that now tax rises are just inevitable.
Well, it's the great betrayal, isn't it, really? The Labour team expressly promised not to raise income tax, VAT or national insurance at the general election. They were adamant about it. There were no ifs and no buts about it. What does Rachel Reeves do? First thing she does is she raises employers' national insurance. We saw that last year. We're seeing that have a crushing effect on employers and particularly small and medium-sized businesses around the country. Now, the very strong speculation is that she's going to have to raise income tax, a massive breach of her promise. And I just don't see how she'll be able to recover from that, because all trust, the very little trust that remains in this government, will be squandered. And as we've seen in the past, governments don't recover when they make a massive breach of trust like this.
Nigel Farage has accused the Chancellor of spending like a drunken sailor. And it certainly is a feeling that if you're on the dole, or if you're a public sector worker, or if you're a recipient of a public sector pension, or you're a train driver, or you're in the Ukraine or foreign aid, you're sitting pretty. Endless giveaways paid for by the taxpayer, no control on our borders, a huge, huge bill, and yet every time they try and make cutbacks, particularly on benefits, there's a backbench rebellion. This government can't control its spending.
Absolutely, it cannot. Its spending is out of control. We saw massive pay rises driven by militant unions who are effectively running government policy at the moment, but massive pay rises to public sector workers driven by militant unions. We've seen huge expenditure on welfare, absolutely no real attempt to reform or reduce welfare spending. We could be saving billions of pounds by scrapping foreign aid, which we're sending to overseas countries. We could be saving billions by reducing our carbon capture scheme, which is a nonsensical net zero fad. There are many ways in which we could reduce public spending, but this government just won't do it.
It's fair to point out that the Labour government, astonishingly, did cut foreign aid more than Conservatives. But I want to move on to, you mentioned that word betrayal. Let's talk about the BBC. An astonishing story broke in the show yesterday afternoon. An independent external advisor, Michael Prescott, blew the whistle on editorial bias. Clear, provable, blatant, unavoidable bias from the BBC, doctoring a Donald Trump documentary, Panorama, splicing together footage to create an entirely false picture of what actually happened. And now it gets worse. Today we found out the BBC, the quotes, pushed Hamas lies around the world by taking Hamas data, statistics and fake news as fact, constantly painting Israel as the aggressor and minimising any Israeli suffering. It's been a dark, dark time for the BBC, and you've been very outspoken on this, Suella Braverman.
Well, I think the case is now compelling that we need to scrap the licence fee. Those of us have been, many of us, including many of us here on GB News, have been advocating for that for years. But I just think this is indefensible now. Actively doctoring and manipulating the truth is the antithesis of what the state broadcaster should be standing for, and at odds with whatever, everything that respectable journalism represents in this country. How can we have any confidence or faith in what the BBC puts out after this episode. It's a shameful day for the BBC. I think Tim Davie really needs to consider his position, but the licence fee and the whole structure of the BBC is not fit for purpose. And it's the latest in a long litany of failures. They refused to describe Hamas as terrorists. They collaborated with agents or those linked to Hamas to produce a documentary. They've minimised some of the suffering in Israel, and they've amplified and distorted some of the issues relating to Gaza. They've been partisan, misleading, and today I'm thinking, I believe really is a day of shame for the BBC.
So two things. Are you saying that Ofcom should investigate, and should Tim Davie go?
Tim Davie needs to go. I just don't see how he can stay in post after not just this misrepresentation, but also the other scandals relating to the BBC, whether it's Hugh Edwards or other very highly paid people at the BBC who have been really shown to have fallen short of BBC's standards of propriety. And I think there needs to be a full-blown investigation into anti-Semitism and also whether the BBC's been adhering to editorial guidelines.
Do you think the Labour Party has got the stomach for that kind of fight? They seem to steam into GB News at the drop of a hat. Cat seems to have got the tongue on this matter.
Exactly. I mean, I thought it was telling this morning, Chris, that Rachel Reeves refused to take a question from the People's Channel. Says it all. Really, they're scared.
Well, it's extraordinary. We are bigger than the rival news channels the past 4 months, but they don't seem to want to take the question, which is, a straightforward question about what our viewers care about. Yeah,
exactly. And I think that's really sticking two fingers up to the British people. People are voting with their feet. They're watching GB News in very, very high and unprecedented numbers. That's a vote of confidence in you. The government should take note of that and pay due deference to that, really.
Suella Braverman, thank you for joining us in the studio in Westminster. Thank you for your company. Always a pleasure.